Lakam, which is peace unto you all. Hayawam Tawab La Atham Za Achikam Yawam Rachagadol Charlotte, which is good day. This is your brother Yawan from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam Kaya. Hamalakot Hashemayim Kwara, repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call Layim La La, but now Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai. Bahasham Rachag Wadashwa Mashanalaza Kwanim Nawa. Wamalakiam Sharachagadol, which is all praises to our Father Yahweh, which means he exists. Bahasham, and the name Yahweh Shai delivers. And double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. This is an article on people.com, and it says Depression era recipes are making a comeback as food budgets tighten. It says TikTok users have been sharing creative meals that stretch groceries, such as fried potatoes with hot dogs, pork cake, and water pie. It says many of the meals made by American families during the Great Depression initially gained popularity because they were affordable and filling, often featuring creative uses of overripe fruits. Think banana bread or shelf-stable ingredients like crackers. It says, but amid the recent 43-day government shutdown, which affected vital food assistance programs, some Depression-era meals gained renewed interest on social media. From water pie to pork cake, below are a handful of Depression-era meals making a comeback online. And it says fried potatoes with hot dogs. It says, reading this one, it says a TikTok user, Food Wanderer, demonstrated adding a starch to a processed meat is an easy way to create a hearty meal. This dish combines fried potatoes, onions, spices, hot dogs, and mushrooms for a one-pot entree. It says ham and potato patties. All right. It says split pea soup. All right. And then it says pork cake. All right. And then it mentions the water pie. But nevertheless, just the point of the lesson that I wanted to get was that people is pretty much feeling it. So I'm going to get a quick precept. This is, give me a second. This is Second Esdras, chapter 9, and we'll start at verse 1. And it says, he answered me then and said, measure thou the time diligently in itself, and when thou seest part of the signs past which I have told thee before, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. It says, therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars of the people in the world, then shalt thou well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning, because the end was prophesied from the beginning. All right. And what, going back up to verse 1, it says to measure the time diligently. And that's essentially done by lining up current events with the scriptures, or lining it up with prophecy, the things that were essentially prophesied about, just pretty much lining up those things to where it's made understandable to those that's ultimately hearing the message, all right, being the elect. So it says, then thou shalt understand that it's the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made, which the Lord is essentially visiting the world which he made, because the Lord is known by his judgments, all right, in which the judgments have been essentially ramping up, because the scriptures say that the earth will cover, or the knowledge of the glory of the Lord will cover the earth as it does the sea, so the Lord is essentially carrying out his judgments, all right, and, before it's all said and done, ultimately everybody on this planet earth is ultimately going to understand that the Lord Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai carried out these judgments, all right, but we're starting to see the judgments of the Lord take effect, all right, so it says, then thou shalt understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. Therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars of the people in the world, so we're seeing the earthquakes, they have an app to where essentially you can see how great of, magnitude the earthquake was and the location of the different earthquakes, so it's been various different earthquakes happening. All right. And it says, in uproars of the people in the world, it's been uproars, over the last, few decades, but it's been increasing in the most recent years. It's been uproars in France. It's uproars right now of the people in America, to where they're having thoughts of like civil unrest and things of that nature, So it's uproars in various different parts of the world. So it says, then thou shalt well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning, because the end was prophesied from the beginning. It says, for like as all that is made in the world had the beginning and an end, and the end is manifest. Hey, the end is manifest. When you go into the word for manifest in Latin, it goes into the main word, and manifest. It goes the MAN part. All right. It goes back to the Latin word manus, which is the hand, which it means something can be grasped, meaning it can be understood, you see, but then also it's twofold, you see, because it's being grasped and understood, because the reality is touching everyone. And then the twofold part about it is that the reality is touching everyone. It's essentially grasping those that are essentially sharing a concurrent experience. Pretty much the reality of the situation. Everybody is essentially being touched by prophecy, you know. So let's get a few more. Because years ago, how this word has been going out, first and foremost from our elders and apostles on down, years ago, people would not have thought about, eating water pie, pork patties, hot dogs and potatoes, but now the end is manifest, as we speak, and these things are going to continue to increase. This is just the beginning. All right. So this is Second Esdras chapter 15, and we'll get verse 10, or we'll start at verse 14, and it says, woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. All right, essentially going into clashes amongst different groups of people. All right, reading it again, verse 15, it says, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands, which that's likened unto Isaiah chapter 19, verse 2, ultimately going to the Egyptians against the Egyptians, you see, because if it's one thing that everybody in America has, nowadays, just about, all right, is the modern day sword, which will be the firearm, so ultimately these people, they already have these things in their arsenal, you see, so being that this country is already divided, it's just going to push forth for a civil unrest leading up into social unrest and then into essentially another civil war. So it says, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. It says, for there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, in the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So sedition goes into violent insurrections. All right. Violent insurrections, violent uprisings. So it says, for there shall be sedition among men, which that goes into those uproars that we read in the previous verse in second Esdras, the ninth chapter. All right, so it says, for there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. Pretty much people running into each other's houses, doing home invasions and stuff like that. It says, they shall not regard their kings nor princes, pretty much not being in the mindset of, being cognizant of the different laws and stuff that's set up by the modern day kings and princes. Right now we're in the point in time to where pretty much people they don't really care about the laws that's set up by the leadership. Right now they're not happy with the leadership that they have been receiving. You see, so people are going to start taking matters into their own hands. So it says, Second Esdras 15 and verse 16, it says, for there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So pretty much people are going to be getting at how they live, and they're going to be using violence, to acquire, different benefits. If they see the next man or the next person, with something that they want, they're going to go and take it. All right, verse 17, it says, a man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able, in which, we see this in different manifold ways, you see, but one way is, through that, how they got the, what is it called, the easy passes. And then also how, Esau Edom can essentially, place, road blockages, but pretty much it's going to be to the point where, people are not going to be able to traverse, as easy as what it is now, which we got a little glimpse of that, during the C-19, you see, but things are going to be a lot more stringent, as far as, in reference to, traveling and traversing, as people can, right now, because i.e., you got the real ID or the digital ID. It's gonna be people against those things, So, and just because of that, people already need permission to go to different places across the world, So people desiring to go to certain specific places, but they don't have what it takes or the certain requirements to go to those places, they're not gonna be able to travel like that, So that essentially plays into verse 17, where it says, "A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able," because Esau is gonna make it very pretty much it's gonna be like a prison planet, one of those dystopian type of movies, that he puts out there, But verse 18, it says, "For because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid." All of those things are going to be happening concurrently. It says, "For because of their pride, the city shall be troubled." Scriptures say that because of many great misery shall be done to them that dwell in the latter times. Roughly paraphrasing, because being that uh, America, Babylon the Great, has rebelled against the Lord. Scriptures say that this place is known as Maratayam, So those that essentially abide in America, Babylon the Great, the heathen don't got a chance, But 2/3, because they want to subscribe to the ways of the cities, or the mindset and the societal norms that's in the Esau cities, they're gonna be destroyed for that pride, because it's pride, to essentially be in the mindset of these heathen. So it says, "For because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid." Men are going to be in the mindset of a woman. It says, "A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods because of lack of bread and for great tribulation." All right, and which, again, it's not going to be, you know, now, now, I mean, things are getting worse. All right, but it's things are steadily, getting worse. It's gonna get worse before it gets worse. Reading it again, Second Esdras 15 and verse 19, it says, "A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor." All right, right now, you can go to the gas station, and open the door, for your common everyday American, so to speak, and someone might say thank you, they might not, but those general customs and courtesies are dwindling, you see. But we're coming into the time to where these things are going to be, that might even be seen as a weakness, if holding the door may be seen as a weakness, in certain people's eyes, and that's essentially the mindset that's going out, you see, because as pursuant to Isaiah the 19th chapter, scriptures say the Egyptians are going to be against the Egyptians, So that spirit is essentially what was lurking in the earth, chiefly America, Babylon the Great, you see, because what made this place so-called great, all right, was the conglomeration. All right, the Lord is essentially touching that idol of conglomeration, all right, and everybody's essentially at each other's neck. All right, so that common everyday neighborly vibe is no longer there. All right, well, it's still some there, but it's dwindling very quickly. All right. So Second Esdras 15 and 19, and the latter, it says, "But shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread, and for great tribulation." And right now, things are still somewhat good. Heavy inflation hasn't hit. It's starting to settle in, you see, but we're still in the times where people can still access certain goods and certain services, you see. But that's what's being done in a so-called green tree. And as the scriptures say, if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry, So which pretty much is painting the picture, if these things is being done while things is supposed to be good. All right, it's not good right now as the status in America, Babylon the Great, as far as the resources, the lifestyle, and et cetera, and et cetera. All right, but there people are doing these things as things that are somewhat good. What's gonna be happening. All right, when all hell has broken loose, people are gonna lose it. They're not gonna have any type of stability. All right. And that's why it's very imperative for us to hunker down in these times, because the truth is our source of stability. All right. But those that's in the world, they're going to be in a mindset of, right now, currently, all right, they eating hot dog pie. They eating water pie, split pea soup, You know, they eating, you know, the creative meals, you know, that, you know, Jake had to eat, you know, when you know, you go in the kitchen when you're younger and you keep can't find no food, you know, you put some crackers and some icing together. You know, that's what these people are doing without this truth. You know, scriptures say that. I'm gonna get that real fast. I'm gonna go ahead and close. Zayashaya, this is Isaiah chapter 65, and we'll get verse 13, and it says, therefore, thus saith the Lord power, behold, my servant shall eat, but ye shall be hungry. All right, and which that's a statement of faith, you see, because as you know, the heathen is starving, 2/3 is starving. You know, the Lord's servants is good. All right, it says, behold, my servant shall eat, but ye shall be hungry. Behold, my servant shall drink, but ye shall be thirsty. Behold, my servant shall rejoice, but ye shall be ashamed. It says, behold, my servant shall sing for joy of heart, but ye shall cry for sorrow of heart, and shall howl for vexation of spirit. You know, so the Lord is ultimately, you know, guiding the elect, you know, whereas those outside of this truth, you know, ultimately they're in a state of, you know, eating water pie, again, eating split pea soup, eating the various different things that was listed in that article, in which it's going to come a point in time to where those things is not going to be accessible. All right, and ultimately the men of the Lord is ultimately being provided for, receiving of that true stability, you know, while 2/3 is just being, you know, laughed at for their predicament and for their lack of spiritual judgment for choosing the ways that was contrary to the scriptures. You know, they're going to be in a very destitute state, you know. So I just wanted to go into that, you see, because the Lord is essentially making it manifest. All right, the prophecies manifest, and, you know, those in the world, you know, they're right at a certain point in time, you know, they were rejoicing, you know, they had smiles on their faces. Now it's starting, the roles are starting to essentially reverse, you see, because no one can get around prophecy, you know. So, you know, just wanted to go into that. Adawan Tazaza Banaya Palos, where there was a beautiful edification to the spirit. Adawan Tazah Adam Yashiyawam Tawa. Lord's will, you all have a good day. Wa Shalom Lakam, which is peace unto you all. Shalom, shalom.